Hello and welcome to this training session of BW7 video training. In this session we are going to look at data warehousing workbench. This really is the heart of BW administrator's day-to-day job, plus it is a key area where BW consultants do their modeling, their configuration and their administration. This slide shows the key functions of the BW data warehousing workbench. The key functions are divided into three major areas: modeling, scheduling, and monitoring. In the modeling area, you essentially design the info objects, the characteristics, the key figures, and the cubes themselves. In the scheduling area, typically you decide the load process, the times on which the loads occur from source system to internal BW system, or within the BW system, for example from the PSA, which is the persistent staging area, onto a DSO, from a DSO onto a cube, from a cube to an aggregate, and so on and so forth. Monitoring is something business as usual. After the project has gone live, you want to make sure that the daily loads, the weekly loads, and the hourly loads are all in order and working properly, and there are no failed jobs. One of the key jobs of a BW consultant is modeling, and the modeling area in the workbench allows you to create different objects, cubes, the relationships between them. The modeling function is essentially used to create and maintain objects that are relevant to the whole data staging process in the BI system. These objects are displayed in a tree structure where the objects are ordered according to the hierarchical criteria. And you can use context menus, which basically means a right click of the mouse in a Windows system, to access the relevant maintenance dialogues and functions belonging to each of the objects in the object tree. This is a key area for a BW consultant, and we will look at it more closely in the real BI system. So this is my logon pad, and this is my BW IDIS system. So I press logon and I give in my user ID. I'm user 16 here. And I see this initial screen. Now this screen looks pretty much like any other SAP system screen. Here, to go to the BW workbench, I use transaction RSA1, which is already under my favorites. So I double click on this, and this is what the data warehousing workbench looks like. So if you look at the modeling area, which is what we are currently in, you can see that there are various tabs for creating and dealing with info sources, info objects, data sources, and so on and so forth. If you go to the administration tab, you see that here you can create process change, for example. You can do change runs, you can analyze authorizations, you can do some remodeling, repartitioning, and so on and so forth. And you have some other areas like transport connection, BI content, translation, and metadata repository. So in this session we are going to focus on the modeling area, and we are going to look at how different objects are created and modified and used in an actual BW project. Let us now go to the workbench again under modeling and try to create an info object. Before we actually do that, what exactly is an info object? In SAP BW, info objects are the smallest available information module or field, and they can be uniquely identified by their technical name. Essentially, there are different types of info objects: characteristics, for example customers or a customer name, and key figures, for example revenue. There are also unit info objects, for example currency or amount unit. There are time characteristics, for example the fiscal year, and there are technical characteristics, for example an internal request number, a load number, and so on. Okay, let us now create an info object. Before we actually do that, we have to create a so-called info area. An info area is essentially a kind of a folder that holds within it all the different kind of info objects, enabling you to find your info objects easily. So we right click and then we get this box wherein we can create our info area. So let's call it group 16, and we'll just give it the same description. So group 16 has been created. We need to go down a little bit and see that group 16 is the last one. Now we right click and create an info object catalog. Let's call this one group 16 as well, so that it's easy to find it later on. We can use the copy from functionality in case we are maintaining tens of info object catalogs. It's easier to just copy them from a template. Info object type, we are going to create a characteristic, so this one is pre-selected, and then we just press the create button. There we have. This is what the catalog looks like. At the moment there isn't any characteristic in this catalog, so this is empty, and we need to activate this. So let me show you the activation. And we get the system message down here that group 16 object has been successfully activated. Now we go back and you can see that under the group 16 info area we have the group 16 catalog. Now if I right click here, it says create info object, and this is where I create my characteristic info object. So let me call this as cost center CC16, description being cost center 16, and I can use a reference characteristic or a template if I want to pre-populate the features of this, but I will not do that now because I want to populate and look at all the features separately. So as you can see here, there are different tabs. The system wants me to first put in the data type, and there are different options. So characteristic, numeric, date, time, these are the different types of characteristic info objects that are available. So I'll simply use a string with length 4 because my cost center is only 4 digits. And then if I look at the Business Explorer tab, when I display this characteristic in my reporting either in Excel or on the web, this tab Business Explorer tab is what helps me decide what I see. So do I see the short description or the long description? Are there any selection restrictions? Do I display text or key, or both text and key? And so on and so forth. Is this relevant for authorization? For HR related data, for example, you might want to make it authorization relevant. The next tab is master data texts. And various pieces of information. We will not go through all the details now. Whether this cost center is part of a hierarchy. Typically in an implementation, cost centers are created as a hierarchy, so that you can roll them up or roll them down and see at a company level what's the cost split up, at a group level what is it, at a branch level, and so on. Does this characteristic have any attributes? So let's put in some standard attributes. 0 comp code, 0 business area, now this is the time dependent field. Usually the attributes are time dependent because in a group situation where you have multiple company codes or business areas, a cost center can be moved from one to the other. This is the compounding screen. Compounding is essentially the process of combining a characteristic info object with another one to ensure that the current characteristic has a unique value. To give an example, for example, in materials management, your characteristic is storage location. Now we know that storage location without a plant does not make sense. For example, storage location A for a refinery plant is a huge storage tank, and storage location A for a frozen food manufacturing plant is a freezer. So how do you know which storage location are you talking about, because both are storage location A? So that's when we use compounding. In our case now we don't need it, so we'll just drop it for now. So now we've covered all the tabs. We can save, and we need to now activate. So when you activate, you can see the system doing various things, and in the end you get the message that the info object has been activated. So we now go back and we see that under our info area group 16, under our catalog group 16, we have a cost center characteristic 16, and if we double click on that, here are the details that we entered a while. Let us now look at how to create key figures. Before we start, we need to make a catalog under our info area to group all the key figures that we might want to create. So create catalog, let's call this catalog group 10 key figures. And the type is a key figure, and I press create, and this is my catalog. Under this there is no key figure, so this folder is empty, which is fine because we haven't created any so far. And now I activate the catalog and I go back. Now right click again, create info object, and my key figure is say amount 10, which is group 10 amount. I do not wish to use any template or a reference. Press enter. The first thing I need to do is to define the type or unit. For the key figure amount, quantity or number, you can choose between the data types decimal number and floating point number. For the date and time key figure types, you can use an amount field or a date field stored as a characteristic. If you choose key figure amount or quantity, you must assign a currency or a measuring unit to it. For key figure type quantity, let's go to quantity. You can choose between a fixed quantity unit such as kg or a variable unit such as the standard BW content unit of 0 unit. When we say the currency or unit is variable, that means we are assigning a field to hold whatever currency a specific transaction is in. So for example, if you have a company in one country selling across the world in different currencies, this key figure would have the values of the sales in different currencies depending on where the goods are sold. So in our case, let's choose amount, and currency can be 0 currency, which is the standard one to use. And now let's move on to the next tab, which is aggregation. Aggregation essentially guarantees that key figures are evaluated meaningfully while running reports, and that they can be summarized using the different characteristics and their values within reporting. In the aggregation field, you specify the function maximum, minimum, or sum, and this is what determines the way in which key figures are aggregated. Under exception aggregation, you have various other options: last value, first value, maximum, minimum, and these determine the way in which the key figure is aggregated using a reference characteristic for exception aggregation while reporting. And this is the reference characteristic for exception aggregation. To give you an example, if you wanted the key figure to represent the number of employees and the employees are assigned to a cost center, in that case you would use the characteristic cost center to do the exception aggregation for the number of employees that you want to calculate. A non-cumulative value is essentially a non-aggregating key figure. Examples include things like head count, account balance, or material inventory. These key figures are non-cumulative in respect to time. For example, you cannot add inventory for this month and the inventory for next month to get the total inventory. Now, to deal with these kind of situations, one option is, for example, to load the inventory balance every night. And another more powerful example could be to create two key figures, say inventory movements and inventory adds and inventory subtracts. So these would track the delta changes in the inventory figures every night and would add or subtract from the original inventory. The inflow and outflow of the inventory example. So in this case, for amount, we are just going to use a standard cumulative value. Now we go to additional properties tab. This tab page is primarily used to change default settings for the display type in reporting again. So number of decimal places I want 2, display I want in 10, and the short description is fine. So these are all the settings I need to do for my key figures: the type and the unit, the aggregation, and the additional properties. And then I hit save, and then I activate. So I get a message that all info objects are activated, and I hit the back button. So here it is, my info area with my key figure catalog and a key figure and a characteristic catalog and a characteristic. So hope you enjoyed this session. We'll see you again soon.